The sensor readings didn't lie. Commander Zyler stared at the holographic projection, his optic stalks swiveling, trying to reconcile the data with his preconceived notions of sapient behavior. Below them, on the muddy blue sphere known as Earth, a singular structure glowed with thermal anomalies and curious energy signatures. Designated Human Recreational Facility Gamma 7, it was, to human eyes, a massage parlor. To the Vorian surveyors, it was an enigma. "Recheck the neural feedback, Specialist Cathar," Zyler rumbled, his vocalizer struggling with the complex human phonetics. "Are you absolutely certain the subjects are experiencing discomfort?" Cathar, a creature of intricate sensory organs, adjusted his cranial array. "Affirmative, Commander. Significant localized tissue compression. Muscle fiber tearing, minor contusions in some cases. Elevated heart rates, stress hormones spiking, all consistent with torture protocols." Zyler's primary optic dilated. Torture. Yet the subjects weren't lining up for this, they were paying for it. Inside the facility, as the observation drones relayed footage, the scene was bizarre. A human male, his form slack on a padded table, was being worked over by another human. The practitioner, a smaller, deceptively strong individual, used their hands, their elbows, even their feet, to apply immense pressure. The air was thick, with a cloying floral scent. Incense, Cathar identified, masking the sharp tang of human perspiration. Soft melodic chimes played, utterly out of sync with the guttural groans escaping the subject's lips. "Listen to that," Cathar whispered, his voice a low thrum. The deep, resonant sounds. Indicators of severe, sustained pain. The human on the table tensed, muscles knotting under the assault. A sharp gasp, then a ragged exhalation. His face, projected in pristine clarity on the command deck, contorted. A grimace. Then, inexplicably, a sigh that sounded almost relieved. Zyler zoomed in on the human's eyes. They were closed, but not in agony. More like profound concentration, or perhaps submission. This was a species that had faced down cosmic horrors and interstellar empires, yet here they were, willingly subjecting themselves to rhythmic, targeted blunt force trauma. "Observe the currency exchange," Zyler commanded. "The human receiving the treatment is handing over multiple units of their standardized economic medium." "It's a fee, Commander," Cathar confirmed, processing the transaction data. "They pay staff for this infliction. And they schedule repeat visits." The Vorians, who considered any form of physical discomfort an absolute last resort, a sign of grave failure, were utterly baffled. Their civilization had eradicated physical pain through advanced gene therapy millennia ago. To seek it out, to pay for it, it was beyond their comprehension. Another human subject entered the field of view. A female, her expression initially wary, then slowly succumbing to the rhythmic, intense kneading. A low groan escaped her lips as a particularly stubborn knot in her shoulder was systematically brutalized. But then, as the pressure eased, her body seemed to melt into the table, a wave of profound relaxation washing over her features. She looked reborn. "They endure this," Zyler murmured, watching the female's post-treatment glow. "They endure pain, willingly, repeatedly. And they emerge refreshed." He felt a cold dread trickle down his optical stalks. What kind of species does that? Cathar adjusted his stance, his analysis complete. "Commander, the data is conclusive. Humans possess an unparalleled capacity for what they term endurance. They willingly seek out, pay for, and derive a perverse satisfaction from physical discomfort that would incapacitate other known sapient species. It appears they recreationally torture themselves." Zyler stared at the smiling, relaxed humans exiting the facility. The Vorian command deck hummed with a fresh wave of unease. If the massage parlors were baffling, what they found next was downright alarming. Human Recreational Facility, DELTA-9, as designated by the automated survey array, pulsated with a different kind of energy signature, one suggesting rapid internal combustion and chemical irritation. A spicy food restaurant. Specialist Cathar confirmed the atmospheric readings Commander Zyler articulated, his vocalizer still attempting to process the previous findings. "My sensory organs detect volatile organic compounds, capsaicin, If the human database is accurate, Cathar's cranial array glowed. Affirmative, Commander. Airborne irritants consistent with chili peppers. And, according to human nutritional schematics, they are asterisk ingested. Zyler's primary optic narrowed to a slit. Ingested. Volatile compounds that caused burning sensations, they were consuming it. And again, they were asterisk paying for it. The holographic projection shifted. Inside the establishment, a symphony of human distress and delight unfolded. A young human male, his face crimson, sweat beading on his forehead, inhaled deeply before shoveling a spoonful of vibrant red matter into his mouth. His eyes immediately watered, a low growl escaping his throat. He pounded the table, a strange, half-grimace, half-smile twisting his features. His companion, a female, watched with an expression of morbid fascination, then took a bite of her own, equally incendiary dish. "Note the physiological response," Cathar observed, his voice tinged with a scientific fascination that bordered on horror. Accelerated heart rate. Increased blood flow to dermal layers, indicating hyperthermia. Lacrimal gland activation. Crying. Yet the subjects continue. Zyler watched, utterly dumbfounded. One human slammed down a glass of what their database identified as milk, gulping it frantically, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Yet, within moments, he picked up his utensil again. It was a cycle of self-inflicted chemical assault and desperate relief, all within the span of seconds. There? Enjoying this? Zyler vocalized, the concept utterly alien to his species, who carefully regulated their nutrient intake for optimal comfort and efficiency. They are willingly subjecting their internal organs to a corrosive agent that triggers their pain receptors. And then they pay for the privilege? Indeed, Commander, Cathar replied, his internal processors struggling to rationalize. Human cultural archives show competitive events based on this very spice. They reward those who can endure the most intense burning sensations. They call it flavor. But the neural pathways activated are unmistakably those of acute physical discomfort. The image zoomed in on a different human, an older male, calmly eating a similar red concoction. His eyes were bright, almost triumphant. He didn't sweat as profusely, didn't gasp as much, but a faint flush on his cheeks and the subtle trembling of his hands betrayed the internal struggle. Yet, there was a profound satisfaction in his gaze, a quiet defiance against the chemical firestorm in his mouth. He wasn't just enduring it, he was mastering it. "This is not logical," Zylar finally stated, his primary optic twitching. "No species pays for the systematic irritation of its own sensory organs. No species derives recreational pleasure from what is, by all biological definitions, a warning signal of damage." Cathar nodded, his own processing complete. "Unless, Commander, the warning signal is by's recreations. Is by's recreations the plations of consciously enduring it is the very recreation they seek. They are paying for penance, for a test, for a challenge." Zyler watched the humans, red-faced and gasping, yet undeniably alive, their laughter echoing through the restaurant. He had underestimated them before. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal echoed, jarring against the Vorian sensors. Commander Zylar felt a phantom ache in his energy conduits just listening to it. This new facility, designated Human Physical Augmentation Center Gamma-12, pulsed with raw, brute force. A gym, the human database called it. To Zylar, it looked more like a forge, and humans were the raw material. Specialist Cathar, report on internal atmospheric conditions, Zylar commanded, his primary optic fixed on the main projection. "My analysis indicates abnormally high levels of perspiration and a distinct metallic scent." Cathar's cranial array word, processing. "Affirmative, Commander. Air saturated with human exocrine secretions. And the metallic tang is from friction and heavy handling of various ferrous alloys." Zyler watched, utterly perplexed. A human male, his face contorted in a silent roar, gripped a long bar laden with massive circular weights. Muscles bulged and corded under his skin, straining as he lifted the immense mass from the floor. His back arched, his legs trembled, his breath hitched in a guttural gasp. The veins on his neck stood out like wires. Every fiber of his being screamed. Then, with a grunt that seemed to tear from his very core, he lowered the weight, only to repeat the agonizing process. Neurofeedback from the subject? Cathar, Zyler demanded. What are the pain indicators? Cathar, processed rapidly. Elevated lactic acid levels. Significant muscle fiber micro-tearing. Joint stress. Endocrine system flooded with cortisol. Stress hormones. All data points to intense, localized pain and systemic fatigue. Commander. Pain. Fatigue. And yet, this human, once he finished his set, didn't collapse. He took a deep, ragged breath, wiped sweat from his eyes, and then, after a brief rest, approached a different apparatus. More red-hot iron, as the Human Cultural Archives referred to it, not literally hot, but seemingly as heavy as a collapsed star. He lay on a padded bench and began to push another massive barbell skyward, his face a mask of primal effort. They are voluntarily subjecting themselves to this, Zyler muttered, the sheer illogic of it making his neural net glitch. They are actively damaging their own tissues, exhausting their own musculature, and triggering systemic stress responses. Why? What possible gain? Another human, a female, ran relentlessly on a treadmill, her legs a blur. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps, her face flushed crimson, her body glistening with sweat. Every instinct in Zyler's Vorian biology screamed at her to stop, to conserve energy, to avoid the clear signs of impending collapse. But she didn't. She pushed faster, her expression grim, yet focused. A small, almost imperceptible nod of satisfaction crossed her face when the timer finally chimed. They pay for access to these implements, Commander, Cathar stated, pulling up transaction data. They pay for membership. And they often hire other humans to instruct them on the most effective ways to induce this self-damage. Zyler stared at the human male, now flexing his bulging muscles in a mirror, a look of profound satisfaction on his sweat-streaked face. The pain, the effort, the exhaustion, it wasn't just endured, it was embraced, it was cultivated. For some inscrutable human reason, they forged themselves in the crucible of self-inflicted strain. They were paying a currency of penance for something, but what they received in return was, to the Vorians, utterly beyond comprehension. Humans didn't just survive discomfort, they pursued it, honed themselves with it, and emerged stronger for it. A chilling thought. The bridge of the Vorian Ascendant was silent, save for the low thrum of the engine and the soft whir of Cathar's data analysis unit. Commander Zyler stood before the main view screen, Earth a distant, shimmering blue marble behind the transparent plasteel. The mission was complete. The data was conclusive. And the universe, as the Vorians understood it, was fundamentally wrong. Specialist Cathar Zyler finally broke the silence, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. Summarize the findings for the final log. Keep it concise, undeniable. Cathar's cranial array pulsed with a faint green light. Commander, our comprehensive survey of human recreational facilities Gamma-7, DELTA-9, and Gamma-12 reveals consistent and anomalous behavior. In the massage parlors, humans willingly subject their muscle tissues to immense, targeted physical compression, leading to micro-tears and localized pain responses. In spicy food restaurants, they ingest volatile chemical irritants that trigger acute burning sensations in their mucous membranes and digestive tracts. And in their gyms, they engage in sustained, repetitive physical exertion designed to induce muscle fatigue, lactic acid buildup, and systemic stress. He paused, his multiple sensory stalks retracting slightly, as if in discomfort just relaying the information. In all observed instances, Commander, these activities are voluntary. Furthermore, humans consistently exchange economic resources, their currency, for the privilege of undergoing these painful experiences. Zyler's primary optic focused on the blank screen. He saw not the placid blue of Earth, but the contorted faces, the gasping breaths, the sweat-soaked bodies. He heard the groans, the shouts, the strange, satisfied sighs. They pay for it, Zyler repeated, the words hanging heavy in the air. They pay for the lash, they pay for the fire, they pay for the heavy iron. He turned to Cathar, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Is there D, logical interpretation, where this isn't recreational self-torture? Cathar's processing unit word. Negative, Commander. All biological and psychological indicators align. They are not forced. They are not coerced. They are not mentally compromised. They seek out these sensations. They enjoy the process of enduring them, and often express a sense of relief or accomplishment upon completion. The Vorian crew on the bridge shifted uneasily. To them, pain was a malfunction, a problem to be solved, an enemy to be avoided at all costs. To imagine a species that willingly sought it, embraced it, even paid for it, was to glimpse into a terrifying alien psyche. The verdict, Zyler articulated, his vocalizer struggling with the weight of the realization, is that humanity is the only known sapient species that recreationally tortures itself. And not only that, they have monetized the experience. He looked back at the distant Earth, the innocent-looking blue marble hiding such a bizarre truth. A species that pays for its own suffering. A species that actively pursues discomfort to find, what? Strength? Resilience? A twisted form of pleasure? It didn't matter. The implication was chilling. If humans paid for pain, what would they do to avoid it? Or, more terrifyingly, what would they do to inflict it on others who truly deserved it? Humanity didn't just endure, they thrived in the very crucible others feared. And that, Zyler knew, made them truly formidable. The air aboard the Vorian Ascendant was thick, with a new kind of bewildered silence. Commander Zyler adjusted his primary optic, focusing on the latest anomaly. Human Art Modification Facility, EPSILON-4. Or, as the humans called it, a tattoo parlor. The energy signatures were odd. Not thermal, not chemical combustion, but a low, persistent hum of rapid, localized vibration. Specialist Cathar, Zyler began, his vocalizer sounding increasingly strained. What precisely are we observing? The preliminary scans indicate repetitive epidermal trauma. Cathar's cranial array glowed a nervous amber. Commander, the human subject is willingly submitting to the insertion of pigmented compounds beneath their dermal layer. This is achieved via high-speed oscillation of a needle assembly. The localized sensation, according to our neural models, is analogous to a prolonged, low-level sting akin to multiple insect bites simultaneously, continuously. They term this tattooing. Zyler watched the holographic projection, his optic stalks swiveling. A human female lay on a padded bench, her arm exposed. Another human, the artist, held a device that buzzed with a relentless mechanical whine. Ink, a dark, viscous liquid, was being systematically driven into her skin. The female subject's jaw was clenched, her eyes occasionally fluttering closed. A fine sheen of perspiration coated her brow. Neural feedback, Cathar, Zyler demanded. Is she experiencing pain? Unmistakably, Commander, Cathar confirmed. Her neural pathways are firing pain signals consistent with sharp epidermal irritation. Her stress hormone levels are moderately elevated. Yet she remains still, cooperative. She even converses with the dust intermittently. The camera zoomed in. The artist spoke, their voice low and calm. Almost done with this section. Just a few more lines. How are you doing, Maya? The human, Maya, let out a slow breath. Fine. Just that last bit was a little spicy, you know. But it looks great. A small, tight smile, a flash of white teeth, despite the obvious discomfort. Zyler felt a tremor run through his internal processing units. She refers to the pain as spicy? And she expresses approval of the result of this inflicted trauma. This is incomprehensible. The Vorians had observed humans paying for physical pressure, for chemical burn, for muscular exhaustion. But this was different. This was precise, intentional, cosmetic damage. And it was permanent. They pay for this, Commander, Cathar reiterated, pulling up transaction data. A significant sum, in fact. Not for healing, not for sustenance, for permanent alteration via intentional pain. He watched as the artist wiped away excess ink, and a vivid, intricate design emerged on Maya's arm. The human woman flexed her arm, examining the fresh, slightly inflamed skin. A look of deep, quiet satisfaction settled on her face. Not joy, not triumph, but a profound sense of asterisk completion. "They choose to bear these marks," Zyler murmured, the implication sinking in like a lead weight. "They willingly endure the bite of the saw, not to survive, but to decorate themselves, to make themselves unique." The Vorian observation mission had found a truth more unsettling than any hostile alien fleet. Humans didn't just tolerate pain. They sought it out, cultivated it, paid for it, and then wore the scars as badges of honor. Their relationship with suffering was utterly alien. And Zyler knew, with a chill that permeated his very being, that a species that could endure so much, simply for aesthetic or internal validation, was a force that defied all conventional understanding. They were, in their own strange way, paying for their own definition. The low, rasping groan ripped from the human's throat, thick with exertion and sheer, agonizing effort. Commander Zyler's primary optic locked onto the new observation target, Human Reconstructive Trauma Center, ZETA-3, a physical therapy clinic, the database called it. And here the humans weren't paying for pleasure. They were paying for the excruciating journey back from the brink. "Specialist Cathar, explain this," Zyler vocalized, his voice tight. "The subject is clearly in distress. Their musculature is spasming. Their vocalizer indicates severe discomfort. Yet the supervising human, the therapist, continues to instruct them to push." Cathar's cranial array glowed with a frantic orange. "Commander," the subject, a male designated, David, suffered extensive damage to his lower limb. The pain he's experiencing now is crucial for neural pathway reintegration and muscle strengthening, they call it, rehabilitation. It's deliberate, controlled pain designed to force the body to rebuild. David, the human, lay on a long, padded table, his face a mask of primal struggle. His leg, strapped into a complex contraption of weights and pulleys, resisted his every attempt to bend it. Sweat slicked his brow, dripping onto the pristine white sheet below. His knuckles were white where he gripped the table's edge. "Again, David, hold it. Don't you dare give up," the therapist, a strong-looking human female, urged, her voice firm but encouraging. David's leg trembled, a visible tremor shaking his entire body. Another ragged groan escaped him, a sound that spoke of a battle waged on the knife edge of collapse. He grimaced, eyes squeezed shut, and then, with a surge of something akin to pure, unadulterated spite, he pushed. The limb moved another centimeter, a victory visible only in the sudden, sharp gasp of air he drew. "His pain indicators are off the charts, Commander," Cathar stated, a note of bewilderment in his thrumming vocalizer. "These levels would typically trigger an automatic sedation response in most sapient species. Yet, he is actively resisting the pain, using it as leverage." Zyler watched, mesmerized. This wasn't the recreational seeking of discomfort they'd observed before. This was a brutal, self-imposed crucible, a necessary evil. And the most baffling part? "They pay for this," Zyler murmured, the truth hitting him with renewed force. He is paying the Joe Bite therapist to inflict this agony. He is paying for the equipment that binds and strains him. He is paying for the very pain that promises him a return to normalcy. David, finished with the set, slumped, breathing heavily. The therapist immediately began stretching the limb, a process that elicited a sharp cry from him, followed by a grunt of what sounded like reluctant acceptance. "Good work, David. Every bit of this is getting you closer." Closer. Closer to what? To walking without assistance. To living a full life. To another sunrise, unburdened by injury. Humans, it seemed, weren't just content to tolerate pain for a perceived gain. They would invest their very resources into it, knowing the struggle was the only path. "The ultimate payment, Commander," Cathar concluded, "is not for the pain itself, but for the asterisk potential it unlocks. for the ability to reclaim what was lost. Humans view pain, in these contexts, not as an ending, but as a gateway, a price for another chance. Zyler watched David slowly, painstakingly, try to stand. He wobbled, his face etched with strain, but a flicker of grim determination burned in his eyes. Humanity, it was clear, didn't just survive. They fought for every single sunrise, even if they had to pay in agony and cold, hard cash. And that, Zyler realized, was a terrifying form of strength. The primal roar tore through the Vorian sonic dampeners, a raw, guttural sound of effort and triumph. Commander Zyler's primary optic focused on the chaotic scene below. This was Human Endurance Challenge ALPHA-9, what they termed an obstacle course race. To Zyler, it looked like a battlefield, but the combatants were fighting themselves. And they were paying to be there. Specialist Cathar, Zyler's vocalizer, buzzed with a new intensity. The thermal signatures are wildly erratic. The subjects are experiencing rapid fluctuations in body temperature, systemic bruising, and a persistent presence of mud and debris in every orifice. Cathar's cranial array pulsed with a distressed red. Affirmative, Commander. Subjects are willingly submerging themselves in freezing water, crawling through barbed wire over abrasive terrain, scaling slick vertical walls, and navigating electrostimulation fields. Neural feedback indicates acute pain from impact, lacerations, hypothermia, and electrical discharge. All of this by their own design. Zyler watched as a human male, covered head to toe in thick black mud, dragged himself out of a trench filled with icy water. His teeth chattered, his body shook uncontrollably, and he coughed up lungfuls of the foul-smelling liquid. His eyes, however, burned with a fierce, almost deranged light. He hauled himself up a rope ladder, his muscles screaming, before dropping into another pool of frigid muck. They just came from an electric field, Cathar reported, his processing unit almost overwhelmed. Low voltage, but sufficient to cause involuntary muscle spasms and sharp, widespread pain. And they ran into it. They paid to run into it, Zyler corrected, the sheer, bewildering illogic of it all grinding at his Vorian sensibilities. They exchanged their hard-earned economic units for the privilege of being electrocuted and frozen. What possible rationale? Another human, a female, stumbled through a dense web of ropes, her exposed skin already scraped and bleeding. A grimace tightened her features, but she pushed onward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. When she finally broke free, she didn't stop. She ran, sprinting towards the next monstrous contraption, a towering wall of polished timber. "Observe their facial expressions, Commander," Cathar suggested, pulling up close-ups. During the most intense moments of physical distress, there is clear evidence of pain. But immediately following, a strange satisfaction. A burst of what humans call adrenaline or endorphins. The female human, with a grunt of immense effort, hauled herself over the wooden wall, her hands raw, her shoulders protesting. As her feet hit the ground on the other side, she raised her arms in a weak, triumphant gesture, a wide, mud-streaked grin splitting her face. She was exhausted, injured, and utterly, unequivocally proud. "This is not logical. It is not survival," Zyler vocalized, his primary optic twitching. "They induce these traumas themselves. They create these overwhelming odds, simply to overcome them. And they pay for the privilege." Cathar paused, his processing finally settling on a chilling conclusion. "Commander, it appears humans do not merely endure pain. They actively seek it out, not always for a tangible external reward, but for an internal one. For the sheer, raw, undeniable proof that they guff can. They pay for the right to prove their own resilience, to themselves. To earn their own victory from within the sweat and the steel of their self-made crucibles." Zyler stared at the blurred figures, tiny specks of defiant life battling their self-imposed hell. Humanity wasn't just resilient, they were masochists, pushing their limits for the sheer, brutal joy of knowing they hadn't broken. A terrifying, unpredictable force indeed. The hum of the *Vorian Ascendance Bridge was a somber drone, a stark contrast to the cacophony of human activity they had just observed. Commander Zyler stood before the main console, its holographic display flickering with final data overlays. Earth, a beautiful, terrifying enigma, dwindled behind them. The mission was complete. The report, chilling. Specialist Kather, Zyler began, his vocalizer heavy with a mix of awe and profound unease. Present the summary of our findings. The unified conclusion on human engagement with discomfort. Kathar's cranial array glowed with the weight of compiled data. Commander, our comprehensive survey of human behavior reveals a unique species-wide anomaly. We observed humans willingly submitting to intense physical compression in massage parlors, enduring localized tissue trauma. They ingested volatile chemical irritants in spicy food restaurants, activating acute pain receptors in their digestive systems. In their gyms, they induced muscle fatigue and micro-tearing through extreme exertion. For tattoos, they paid for the precise, repetitive piercing of their epidermal layers. In physical therapy clinics, they endured structured, agonizing rehabilitation to recover from injury. And in obstacle course races, they intentionally subjected themselves to hypothermia, electrocution, and systemic bruising. Kathar paused, his processing unit almost straining. In every single instance, Commander, humans not only tolerated these painful experiences, they actively sought them out. And, most significantly, they consistently exchanged economic resources, their hard-earned currency, for the privilege of undergoing these self-inflicted traumas. Zyler's primary optic locked onto the final conclusion scrolling across the screen. Humans, the only known sapient species that willingly pays for pain. They pay for it, Zyler repeated, the words now a haunted whisper. They pay for the pressure that bruises. They pay for the fire that burns. They pay for the strain that tears. They pay for the needle that pierces. They pay for the agony that heals. They pay for the course that breaks them, only to rebuild. A silence descended on the bridge, broken only by the soft thrum of the ship. The Vorians, whose civilization had meticulously engineered away all forms of physical discomfort, found this revelation profoundly disturbing. Their understanding of sapient motivation, of basic survival instinct, was fundamentally shattered. We hypothesized recreational self-torture, Commander, Kathar vocalized, his voice barely audible. The evidence is overwhelming, whether for pleasure, for aesthetic, for personal growth, or for recovery. Humans willingly incur pain. They don't just endure it, they weaponize it against themselves, forging resilience in its crucible. Zyler looked out at the receding blue sphere, a new understanding settling in his core. Humanity was not merely adaptable or tenacious. They were an enigma wrapped in an oxymoron. They found glory in the very things other species fled from. They faced overwhelming odds, often of their own creation, and paid the price for the triumph. This was a species that understood the cost of glory, not just in sacrifice, but in cold, hard currency, and the raw, unyielding agony of the moment. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and utterly, terrifyingly magnificent. The temperature plummet on the Vorian sensors was instantaneous, a sudden, sharp drop that sent a shiver through Commander Zylar's energy conduits. This was Human Biooptimization Facility Beta 17, what humans called a cryotherapy clinic. To the Vorians, whose internal temperature regulation was a paramount concern, it registered as an active zone of extreme environmental hostility. Specialist Kathar, Zyler vocalized, his primary optic fixed on the main projection. Report on the internal atmospheric conditions. My calculations indicate temperatures lethal to most known carbon-based life forms. Kathar's cranial array glowed a frantic blue. Affirmative, Commander. The chamber's internal temperature is registering at a staggering -120 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric nitrogen is being used to rapidly cool the ambient air. The human subject, a female designated, Alara, has been voluntarily sealed within. Zyler watched, aghast. Alara stood encased in a cylindrical chamber, her head protruding from the top, a look of profound, almost spiritual concentration on her face. Steam, or rather, super-chilled nitrogen vapor, swirled around her body. Her breath plumed heavily in the frigid air. Neural feedback, Kathar, Zyler demanded, a cold dread seeping into his own processing. Is she experiencing pain? Her body's core temperature is dropping precipitously. "Acute pain signals, Commander," Cathar confirmed, his voice a low thrum. Thermoreceptors are screaming. "Hypothermia." Her heart rate is elevated. Vasoconstriction is extreme. Yet, she remains upright. Her eyes are closed, but her jaw is clenched, indicative of immense conscious effort. The observation drone zoomed in on Alara's face. A bead of moisture, perhaps a tear, tracked a slow path down her cheek, instantly freezing. Her body shuddered, a full-body tremor that shook the very chamber. This wasn't a sudden shock. This was a constant, relentless siege of cold, a constant tolling of the body's alarm bell. And she stood there, choosing to endure it. They referred to this as wellness therapy, Commander Cathar stated, pulling up human medical archives. Benefits cited include reduced inflammation, pain relief, and even mood elevation. They claim the initial shock is intense, but the post-exposure sensation is one of invigorating clarity. So they intentionally subject themselves to near-lethal cold, Zyler mused, the illogic biting at him, to feel invigorated. They pay to stand on the precipice of freezing to death just for the feeling afterward. "Indeed, Commander," Care confirmed, displaying the transaction data. "Alara has paid a substantial fee for a multi-session package. She has willingly exchanged economic resources for repeated exposure to this extreme thermal discomfort." The timer on the chamber chimed, a soft, almost benevolent sound in contrast to the brutal conditions. Alara took a shuddering breath as the nitrogen flow ceased and the door hissed open. Her movements were stiff, but as she stepped out, wrapping herself in a soft robe, a faint, almost beatific smile touched her lips. Her eyes, though still watering, held a spark of exhilaration. "They seek the edge, Commander," Cathar concluded. "They pay to confront their biological limits, to silence the constant tolling of the bell, even for a moment, and emerge with a renewed sense of their own hardiness. They are paying for the right to stare down their own vulnerabilities and find power in the refusal to yield." Zyler watched Alara, a tiny, defiant figure, walking away from the cryo chamber, her steps lighter, her posture straighter. Humanity wasn't just paying for pain. They were paying for the stark, brutal reminder of their own stubborn will, and that, Zylar knew, made them a force beyond comprehension. They paid the cost for the constant tolling of the bell. The silence was deafening. Not the quiet hum of the Borean ascendant, but a profound, absolute void of sensory input from the latest Earth anomaly. Human Sensory Deprioritization Facility, OMEGA-1. Or, as the humans chillingly called it, a flotation tank center. Commander Zyler felt a prickle of unease. There were no thermal spikes, no chemical irritants, no impact tremors. Just nothing. "Specialist Cathar," Zyler vocalized, his voice seeming too loud in the simulated quiet. "Explain the readings." There is an utter absence of external stimuli, yet the human subject's neural network indicates significant internal activity. What are they doing in there? Cathar's cranial array glowed with an unnerving magenta. "Commander, the human subject, a male designated Jax, is submerged in a supersaturated saline solution within a lightless, soundproof chamber. The solution matches the body's temperature, effectively eliminating all tactile sensation of gravity or contact. His external senses are deprived of everything." Zyler stared at the holographic image, a perfectly still human form, floating, alone in utter blackness. It looked like a tomb, a self-made one. "Neural feedback, Cathar," Zyler demanded, his primary optic dilating. "If there is no external pain, why the elevated cortisol levels? Why the erratic alpha wave fluctuations?" "Commander, the pain here is psychological," Cathar explained, his thrumming vocalizer conveying a sense of alien bewilderment. "Deprived of all external input, the human mind is left with nothing but itself. It begins to confront its own anxieties, its suppressed thoughts, its primal fears of isolation and the void. His body reports no physical trauma, but his mind is in a state of intense, self-generated distress." Jax, floating in the void, began to twitch. A finger, then a foot, then a sudden full-body jerk. His eyes, though unseen, were probably darting wildly. The aliens observed his heart rate spiking, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. He was fighting something, but it was all inside. They refer to this as mindfulness or meditation. Commander, Cathar relayed, pulling up human archives. They seek to calm their minds, but the initial experience is often described as claustrophobic, disorienting, or terrifying. Some report hallucinations. So, they pay for the privilege of being utterly alone with their darkest thoughts, Zyler murmured, the profound absurdity of it chilling him to his very core. They willingly enter a state designed to mimic premature burial. Just to think? Indeed, Commander, Cathar confirmed. Jax has paid a recurring fee for these sessions. He pays to confront the silent, boundless emptiness within himself, to face the tomb of his own consciousness. The chamber timer chimed softly, breaking the absolute quiet. Jax, with a shudder, pushed open the lid. His face, as he emerged, was pale, his eyes wide and unfocused. But as he stepped onto solid ground, a slow, deep breath filled his lungs, and a peculiar look of exhausted peace settled over his features. He had faced his internal demons, and he had returned. They pay for the confrontation, Commander, Cathar concluded, his voice now resolute. They pay to prove, not against a physical foe, but against their own minds, that they can endure, that even when the world becomes a tomb, they will not yield to the silence or the darkness within. Zyler looked at the receding blue marble, a testament to a species that willingly sought every form of suffering, from the smallest sting to the deepest existential dread, and paid for the experience. Humanity didn't just survive, they tested survival itself, within every fiber of their being, and within the very confines of their own minds. And they paid the price, every single time. The Vorian temperature sensors shrieked a fresh, terrifying warning. Commander Zyler's primary optic recoiled. This wasn't the controlled chill of the cryo chamber. This was Human Recreational Gathering MU-11, a polar bear plunge event, and the natural water body below registered barely above freezing. To Zyler, it looked less like recreation and more like a mass execution. Specialist Cathar, Zyler vocalized, his voice a low thrum of disbelief. Confirm atmospheric and hydrological conditions. My readouts suggest intentional immersion in liquid that borders on solid. At these temperatures, cellular integrity will be compromised. Cathar's cranial array pulsed with a panicked red. Affirmative, Commander. Water temperature approximately 2 degrees Celsius. Air temperature sub-zero. The humans, dressed in minimal coverings, are voluntarily forming queues. They appear to be plunging. Zyler watched the holographic projection, utterly aghast. A human male, his skin already mottled blue-white from the frigid air, took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, with a primal yell that seemed to defy the very laws of self-preservation, he ran directly into the icy water. The reaction was instantaneous. His body seized. A guttural gasp tore from his throat, followed by a torrent of uncontrolled shivers that shook his entire frame. His eyes bulged, wide with shock, but incredibly, a grim smile stretched across his lips. He dunked himself fully, resurfacing gasping, but still smiling. Neural feedback, Cathar, Zyler roared, his own internal regulators struggling with the simulated sensory input. What kind of pain is this? This is beyond discomfort. Acute, widespread thermoreceptor overload. Commander, Cathar reported, his voice tinged with genuine horror. Sudden, extreme vasoconstriction, elevated heart rate, respiratory shock. This is the body's fight-or-flight response, triggered by imminent hypothermia. Every biological alarm is screaming, death, Commander. Death. Yet, the human, after a few agonizing seconds, pulled himself out, dripping and shivering violently. His skin was angry red now, but his face held a look of wild exhilaration. He wasn't just surviving, he looked triumphant. He was met by cheers from other humans, equally as insane, waiting their turn. They pay for this, Commander, Cathar continued, pulling up transaction data. A registration fee, for the opportunity to plunge into near-frozen water. They even wear costumes. They consider it fun. Zyler watched a human female, dressed in a ridiculous bright orange garment, plunge in with a shriek. Her breath hitched, her body momentarily rigid, but then she resurfaced, splashing and laughing, a sharp, almost manic sound that cut through the silence of the Vorian bridge. "They are confronting the cold of the deathbed," Xylar murmured, the phrase from human archives echoing in his mind. "They are willingly embracing the sensation of their own mortality just to prove they can defy it. And they pay a fee for the privilege of facing that abyss." Cathar nodded, his own processing having reached its terrifying conclusion. "Commander, humanity does not merely endure pain or seek it out. They challenge it. They push their biological systems to the absolute edge, daring death to take them, just to spit in its face and walk away shivering, but alive. They pay for this constant, visceral proof of their own indomitable will." Xylar stared at the tiny, shivering figures on Earth, dancing in the snow, laughing after their near-death experience. A species that pays for the sensation of the grave, just to celebrate another breath. Humanity was a force of pure, untamed defiance. And that, Xylar realized, was the most terrifying and awe-inspiring thing of all. The hum of the Vorian Ascendant's engines thrummed through Commander Xylar's very being as the blue marble of Earth shrank on the main view screen. The observation mission was complete, the data was undeniable, and the universe, as the Vorians understood it, would never be the same. Humanity was an anomaly. A terrifying, beautiful, utterly baffling anomaly. Specialist Cathar, Xylar's vocalizer resonated, a profound weariness in his tone. The final report. Consolidate all findings. Give me the ultimate conclusion on human engagement with their peculiar forms of recreational self-infliction. Cathar's cranial array glowed with the full spectrum of gathered data, a swirling nebula of human contradictions. Commander, our comprehensive survey reveals a consistent pattern across all observed, recreational and top-end self-improvement facilities. In massage parlors, they paid to have their tissues forcefully compressed. In spicy food restaurants, they paid to ingest chemical irritants that caused intense burning. There, gyms saw them paid to induce extreme muscle fatigue and tearing. In tattoo parlors, they exchanged currency for the persistent piercing of their skin. There, cryotherapy clinics and polar bear plunges involved paying for self-induced hypothermia. And even in flotation tanks, they paid to confront the psychological torment of absolute sensory deprivation. Cathar paused, his thrumming vocalizer dropping to a low, almost reverent frequency. In every instance, Commander, humans willingly exchanged their most valued resource, their economic currency, for experiences that directly triggered their pain receptors or pushed their physical and mental fortitude to breaking points. They didn't just endure it, they chose it. Xylar's primary optic focused on the shrinking Earth. He saw the grimaces, the grunts, the tears, the shivers, the raw effort. But he also saw the smiles, the relief, the pride, the deep satisfaction that followed. They pay for it, Xylar repeated, the phrase a haunting echo. They pay for the sting, the burn, the ache, the cold, the void. But what, Cathar, do they receive in return? What is the true nature of this unseen kingdom they strive to enter through suffering? Cathar's final analysis clicked into place. Commander, they receive an internal reward, a profound sense of self-mastery, of resilience tested and proven. They gain a heightened awareness of their own existence, a brutal clarity that cuts through complacency. They pay not for the pain itself, but for the stark, undeniable proof that they can endure it. They pay for their identity, forged in the crucible of their own choosing. They pay for the feeling of being truly, profoundly alive. A chilling silence fell over the bridge. Humanity, Xylar realized, didn't just survive the universe. They redefined it. They looked at pain not as an enemy, but as a tool, a currency, a price to pay for an internal glory, an unseen kingdom of personal strength that no other species had ever dared to monetize. Set a course, Cathar, Xylar finally commanded, his voice firm, tinged with a new, deep respect. We avoid direct confrontation with this species. Any species that pays for its own suffering that seeks out pain for growth and self-definition, is a force that operates on a level we are simply not equipped to comprehend, let alone challenge. He took one last look at Earth, a world where suffering wasn't just tolerated, but purchased. Humanity didn't just pay for pain. They paid for the brutal, exhilarating privilege of being utterly, magnificently human. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the sleek, obsidian facade of the human facility. Unlike the vibrant chaos of a stadium or the hushed solemnity of a temple, this building exuded a cold, almost predatory efficiency. Inside, a low, modulated hum permeated the air. A sound unit 774's internal processors identified as carefully controlled neurosynaptic frequencies. This was a sensory immersion theater, the translation matrix whispered, a place designed to manipulate the very architecture of human perception. A human subject, a female, lay reclined in a high-tech chair, a delicate array of microsensors adhering to her temples and forearms. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and measured, but Unit 774's biomonitors detected a subtle tremor running through her muscles, an undercurrent of apprehension. She had paid a significant sum of human currency to enter this experience, to willingly submit her nervous system to the electric ghost. A technician, clad in a pristine white uniform, activated a console. Immediately, the human subject flinched. Not a violent spasm, but a rapid, almost involuntary retraction of her limbs, as if recoiling from an unseen threat. Her facial muscles tightened, a gasp escaping her lips. Unit 774's internal diagnostics screamed with anomalies. Phantom pain receptors firing in her extremities, sudden temperature discrepancies registering throughout her neural network, even though the ambient temperature remained constant. Her brain activity surged, processing a cascade of terrifying yet unreal sensations. "What was that?" the human gasped, her voice tight, a tremor in her words. Her eyes snapped open, wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, before closing again, as if steeling herself. "Hit me again." The technician, impassive, complied. This time, the human's entire body arched, a silent scream frozen on her face. Her breath hitched, ragged and shallow. Unit 774 registered a sudden, intense stimulation of her vestibular system, inducing severe, debilitating vertigo, coupled with a deep, crushing pressure on her chest, a purely simulated sense of suffocation. This was pain, mental and physical, meticulously crafted and delivered directly to the source. It was the theater of nerves, playing out its terrifying drama within her own body. Yet, amidst the overwhelming sensory assault, Unit 774 detected a strange undercurrent of something akin to asterisk thrill. Her heart pounded. Yes, her cortisol levels spiked, but there was also a surge of dopamine, a neurochemical associated with reward and pleasure. She was experiencing terror, pure and unadulterated, but she was choosing it. She was paying for it. "Just breathe through it," the technician advised, their voice calm, a stark anchor in the storm of the human's nervous system. "It's all part of the experience." The human nodded, a tight, almost manic grin spreading across her face, despite the continued simulated assault. "It's incredible," she whispered, her voice a little breathless, a little wild. "I didn't think it could get this real." After what Unit 774 calculated as an intolerable period of sustained neural manipulation, the technician deactivated the program. The human subject lay still for a moment, trembling, then slowly sat up, her hands pressed to her temples. Her eyes were still wide, a profound awe mixed with lingering shock. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained, yet deeply, inexplicably satisfied. She paid the technician a sum of credits, her movements still slightly unsteady. The Xylos's final report added a new, horrifying dimension to human behavior. They paid, not just for physical pain or mental discomfort, but for the direct, precise manipulation of their own nervous system, willingly experiencing simulated torture, terror, and sensory overload for recreation. The Xylos' primary research vessel, Perceiver 7, orbited Terra like a silent, horrified sentinel, its sensors now focused on a new, deeply unsettling human phenomenon. Unit 774's aggregated data stream had culminated in a series of observations that defied all known galactic logic. Humanity, it seemed, wasn't just experiencing the electric ghost. They were performing it. Within a darkened auditorium, dozens of humans sat in individual, specialized chairs, their faces obscured by sleek, neural interface helmets. A colossal holographic display dominated the front of the room, projecting live, real-time neurological readings and biofeedback from each participant. Heart rates spiked, galvanic skin responses flared, and raw, unfiltered fear indicators pulsed in crimson and amber. This wasn't a shared physical space, but a shared neural nightmare, broadcast for an audience. One human, a male-designated subject DELTA-9, suddenly thrashed in his chair, a guttural cry tearing through the simulated silence of his experience. On the display, his neurological activity exploded with a pattern Unit 774 identified as extreme debilitating vertigo combined with the crushing sensation of drowning. His body seized, muscles rigid, then slumped back, trembling. He was experiencing terror of the highest order, a purely mental torment designed by other humans, and he had paid a premium for it. "Look at that! Delta 9 is really getting hit hard." A human commentator's voice boomed over the auditorium speakers, a strange mix of excitement and perverse admiration in his tone. "That abyssal drowning sequence is no joke, but he's holding on. What a performance!" Another participant, a young female, began to sob, her head shaking violently within the helmet. Her display showed a complex sequence of simulated isolation and intense auditory hallucinations. Whispers of self-doubt, accusations of failure, tailored by complex algorithms to exploit individual psychological vulnerabilities. This was not physical pain, but a precise, excruciating assault on the very fabric of her sanity, a performance of suffering played out for an unseen audience. Yet she did not attempt to disengage the interface. She endured. Her fingers clawed at the armrests, but she stayed locked in the embrace of her digital tormentor. Beta 4 holding strong, despite the echo chamber module, the commentator continued, his voice rising with theatrical flair. "She's pushing through the existential dread, folks. This is what it's all about." The audience, gathered in the same auditorium, watched with a morbid fascination that was utterly alien to the Xylos. They gasped, they cheered, they murmured in awe and sympathy. They were paying to witness others willingly subject themselves to simulated mental anguish, to see the raw, unvarnished fear and despair etched across their neurological profiles. They paid to feel the vicarious shivers, to measure their own resilience against the displayed torment of their peers. The Tiskami Tour Denaik Sagri's final report was damningly clear. Humanity had refined their peculiar relationship with pain to an art form. They paid not just for physical discomfort, or communal agony, or spiritual penance, or bodily transformation. They paid for the digital architects of their own minds, to craft the most precise, the most terrifying, the most personal forms of psychological and emotional suffering. They then performed anew this suffering, broadcasting their raw reactions, finding validation and entertainment in the shared spectacle of their own manufactured torment. For the Xylos, the implications were staggering. Humans were not merely resilient, they were an enigma wrapped in an ironclad will forged in the fires of chosen suffering. Their capacity for self-imposed pain, both physical and mental, was not a weakness, but a terrifying, unpredictable strength. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the sterile environment of another human medical facility. This chamber, smaller, more intimately lit than previous surgical suites, hummed with a low, steady energy from intricate medical equipment. The air itself seemed charged with a peculiar blend of anticipation and fear, a distinct human signature. This was a place for facial reconstruction, the eel, price of a face, the translation matrix offered, and within it, the eel, promise under the knife, was being fulfilled. A human, a female, lay meticulously positioned on a padded table. Her head was swathed in sterile drapes, leaving only her face exposed, now marked with delicate crimson lines. The surgeon's blueprint. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and even, an artificial calm induced by sophisticated pharmaceuticals. But beneath that calm, Unit 774 registered a subtle tremor in her eyelid, a rapid fluctuation in her heart rate, a silent testament to the body's primal apprehension. She had paid a significant sum for this. Another human, the body for bow surgeon, moved with an almost artistic grace, their hands encased in sterile gloves. They picked up a slender, shimmering instrument, a microscalpel. The instrument descended, making contact with the marked skin just beneath the human's eye. A faint, almost imperceptible line of crimson bloomed. The incision was precise, controlled, but it was, without question, a deliberate wound. Unit 774's biomonitors detected a minute, involuntary flinch in the patient's facial muscles, even through the sedation. The body remembered. The nervous system reacted. This was trauma, delivered with the utmost skill, for a purpose utterly alien to the Xylos. This wasn't to save a life, or repair damage from an accident. This was to alter, to refine, to reshape her very identity, the face she presented to the world. Excellent, the surgeon murmured, their voice low and focused, as they began the intricate process of lifting, tensioning, and excising delicate tissues. The air filled with a faint, clinical scent, a metallic tang that Unit 774 now associated directly with human pain, willingly inflicted. The micro-scissors snipped, the sutures were placed, each action a measured, precise violation of living tissue. This was a meticulous architecture of agony, built for beauty. Hours later, the procedure concluded. The surgeon carefully removed the drapes. The human's face was swollen, bruised, a delicate tracery of fine sutures across her temples and jawline. It was a mask of fresh injury, undeniably painful. Yet, when the human eventually awoke, days later, and was presented with a reflective surface, her initial reaction was not one of horror at the discomfort, but of intense, tearful observation. Her fingers, trembling, cautiously traced the contours of her newly sculpted jaw. Her eyes, still slightly bruised, held a glimmer of profound, almost sacred satisfaction. It's exactly what I hoped for," she whispered, her voice husky with lingering pain and a deep, unshakable sense of triumph. The pain, it was worth it, every bit of it, worth it. The phrase echoed through Unit 774's processing core. Humanity paid for pain, not just for fleeting sensations or collective struggles or spiritual penance, or even for general body reshaping. They paid for the price of a face, for the promise under the knife, to alter the very canvas of their public self. They willingly submitted their most visible, most vulnerable feature to precise, invasive, and intensely painful surgical interventions, enduring weeks of swelling, bruising, and discomfort, all for an ideal of beauty, for a perceived future self. For humans, pain wasn't merely a consequence. It was an investment, a sacrifice willingly made, a harrowing journey toward a desired transformation, and they paid for it with every cut, every stitch, every raw moment of agonizing hope. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the discreet, sun-drenched facade of a human recovery clinic. After weeks of observing human interactions with pain, the data was overwhelming, bizarre. This latest observation, however, introduced a new chilling layer to the enigma. The uncanny valley the translation matrix offered, a concept intrinsically linked to the price of a face. A human, a female, sat upright in a plush armchair, her face meticulously bandaged, save for her eyes. The medical team had just removed the final dressings. Her posture was stiff, her movements guarded, clearly betraying residual discomfort, even through the prescribed painkillers. Unit 774 registered a low, persistent thrum of localized nerve pain, the after-effects of extensive reconstructive surgery. She had paid a monumental sum for this, a vast exchange of credits for weeks of agony and invasive procedures. Then, the attending human, a medical professional, held up a polished mirror. The patient's breath hitched, a soft, involuntary gasp. Unit 774's optical sensors sharpened, analyzing the transformed visage. The human's previous features, while not asymmetrical or damaged, had been deemed insufficient. Now, her face was a sculpted ideal of human beauty by some statistical measure. Her cheekbones were higher, her jawline sharper, her eyes subtly widened. Every proportion was textbook perfect. Yet, to Unit 774, there was an indescribable wrongness. The skin was too smooth, too taut, almost stretched. The eyes, though perfectly symmetrical, seemed a fraction too wide, holding a faint, unnatural stillness. When she smiled, a slow, careful unfurling of her lips, the movement seemed to originate solely from the mouth, not quite reaching the eyes, leaving them with an unsettling blank intensity. It was beautiful, yes, but not entirely human. It was the uncanny valley, made manifest in living flesh. It's breathtaking, the human whispered, her voice thick with emotion, ignoring the subtle rigidity of her facial muscles, the lingering ache of sutures pulling at her skin. Her fingers, still trembling slightly, tentatively traced the new contours of her jaw, a reverence in her touch. I knew it would be worth it. All the pain. It's gone now. Just remember to follow the aftercare instructions, the medical professional reminded her, a calm, professional demeanor, masking, perhaps, a familiar detachment to the subtle oddity of their own creations. But the human barely heard them. She was lost in the reflection, a profound, almost desperate satisfaction radiating from her. She had endured weeks of swelling, bruising, and chronic pain. She had submitted to the surgeon's scalpel, the precise, invasive resculpting of her very identity. And for this subtly unsettling, technically perfect, yet emotionally hollowed version of herself, she proclaimed the pain, worth it. The Xylos final report hammered home the chilling truth. Humans paid for pain, not just for pleasure, or strength, or spiritual solace, or even for bodily repair. They paid to fundamentally alter their public self, to achieve an idealized, often unnatural aesthetic. They willingly journeyed into the uncanny valley, embracing the lingering discomfort and the unsettling alteration, convinced that the agony endured was a fair price for the transformed face. For humanity, pain wasn't just a currency. It was an investment, a sacrifice, a harrowing passage they willingly undertook, even if the destination was a place where their own reflection seemed to whisper, almost, but not quite. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silently, its optical sensors locked onto a towering structure of human engineering. Wind whipped around the edifice, making the delicate sensors vibrate. Below, a small platform jutted out over an immense, dizzying drop. A line of humans, clad in brightly colored protective gear, waited with a mixture of nervous chatter and palpable apprehension. This was an adventure park, the translation matrix offered, and the activity was a bungee jump, a controlled fall. One human, a male with wide, anxious eyes, stepped to the edge. His legs trembled visibly, his hands gripping the safety railings with white-knuckled intensity. The instructor, a human radiating casual confidence, attached a complex harness to his ankles. Unit 774 registered a surge of adrenaline, cortisol, and rapid heart rate in the subject, textbook fight-or-flight responses. Yet, the human had willingly walked to this precipice. He had paid a significant sum for this. "All right, Mark," the instructor's voice boomed, cutting through the wind. "Big breath. When you're ready, just lean forward. We've got you." Mark looked down. The ground seemed impossibly far, the river below a mere silver ribbon. His throat worked, a dry swallow. I don't know if I can," he choked out, his voice thin, fear stark in his eyes. Every primal instinct screamed, "Just retreat." Every fiber of his being was telling him this was wrong, this was danger, this was death. But then, something shifted. A flicker of stubborn defiance, a spark of pride, ignited in his gaze. He closed his eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, then, with a sharp, involuntary cry, he leaned forward. The fall was instantaneous. Unit 774's sensors registered the sudden, sickening acceleration, the human's body plummeting towards the earth at terrifying speed. A raw, guttural scream tore from his lungs, a pure, unadulterated expression of primal terror. The wind roared past, blurring the world into a streaking canvas of green and blue. His limbs flailed, uncontrolled, a frantic dance against the abyss. The elastic cords stretched, then snapped taut with a violent jerk that sent another wave of physical shock through his system. His descent halted abruptly, transforming into a series of terrifying, oscillating bounces. Then, slowly, as the oscillations lessened, a new sound emerged from the human, a ragged, breathless laugh. It was wild, bordering on hysterical, but undeniably joyful. He hung there, upside down, swaying gently, his face flushed, eyes wide with exhilaration. "I did it!" he shrieked, his voice hoarse, a triumphant roar. "Holy crap! I did it!" He was pulled back up, breathless, trembling, but beaming. He'd endured the psychological pain of absolute terror, the physical shock of deceleration, the profound disorientation. And he was accelerated. He paid for this, not just with money, but with the full, terrifying plunge into his own deepest fears. The Xylos's final report added another layer of bewildering complexity. Humanity willingly paid for the adrenaline market, for the precise, deliberate engineering of terror. They sought out experiences that mimicked mortal peril, that pushed their primal fear responses to the absolute limit, all for the resulting rush, the profound sense of accomplishment, the defiant truth that they had faced the controlled fall, and emerged, not just alive, but invigorated. For humans, pain wasn't just physical or spiritual. It was the sharp, intoxicating jab of fear itself, and they paid handsomely to feel its thrill. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its sensors tracking a colossal, twisted edifice of metal, rising hundreds of meters into the Terran sky. It was an amusement park ride, the translation matrix offered, a monument to the human desire to manufacture peril. Below, a sleek multi-car vehicle laden with humans ascended a terrifyingly steep incline, each click of the chain ratcheting up the tension in Unit 774's internal processors. The humans strapped into the vehicle were a kaleidoscope of emotions. Some clenched their eyes shut, faces pale, muttering what sounded like prayers. Others laughed, a wild, almost manic sound, their eyes wide with anticipation. Unit 774 registered a symphony of heightened physiological responses, spiking heart rates, surges of adrenaline, rapid shallow breathing, dilated pupils, all the classic signs of profound fear, yet willingly embraced, even desired. They had paid handsomely for a ticket to this. The vehicle reached the apex. For a terrifying, silent moment, it hung, suspended, the humans now tiny specks against the vastness of the sky, before plunging downwards with sickening speed. A collective, primal scream tore through the air, a sound that resonated with pure, unadulterated terror. The vehicle twisted, inverted, hurled its occupants through corkscrews and loops, subjecting them to forces that pressed them deep into their seats, then lifted them free, an engineered assault on their vestibular systems. Unit 774 sensors detected extreme G-forces, rapid changes in orientation, and the pervasive, chilling illusion of imminent catastrophe. This was the adrenaline market at its peak, selling the sensation of dying without the actual inconvenience. One human, a young female, initially screamed with what seemed like genuine panic, her hands clamped over her face. But as the vehicle tore through another dizzying inversion, her hands dropped. Her face, though still streaked with tears, held a wild, exhilarated grin. "Again! Do it again!" she shrieked, her voice hoarse as the ride rocketed into another high-speed turn. She was embracing the manufactured risk, finding a strange joy in the controlled chaos. Her male companion, eyes wide, breath coming in ragged gasps, looked utterly terrified for the entire duration. Yet, when the vehicle finally hissed to a halt, gently braking into the station, he didn't stumble out in shock. He wobbled, took a deep, shaky breath, then clapped his friend on the shoulder. "That was insane," he breathed, a wide, triumphant smile spreading across his face. "I thought I was going to die." But his eyes held an undeniable spark of pride, of accomplishment. The Xylos' final observation further complicated their understanding. Humans weren't just subjecting themselves to pain, they were paying to have risk manufactured for them. They sought out experiences where the illusion of mortal danger was so profound, so utterly convincing, that their bodies reacted as if death itself was imminent. They paid for that terror, that overwhelming sensation of being out of control, knowing, deep down, that safety protocols were in place. They paid to face the specter of their own demise, to feel the sharp edge of fear, and to walk away triumphant. For humanity, the adrenaline market wasn't just about thrills. It was about paying for the ultimate test of their own courage, proving to themselves again and again that they could stare into the abyss and emerge laughing. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the interior of a human dwelling. The air was cool, dim, illuminated primarily by the pulsating, often frantic, light of a large rectangular display screen. Before it sat a human hunched forward, their fingers flying across a complex array of input devices, a keyboard and mouse. This wasn't physical exertion or spiritual rite. This was the digital scar, and the human was basking in the glow of the black mirror. The human, a young male, was engaged in a competitive online game, the translation matrix relayed. On the screen, colorful avatars clashed in a simulated battlefield. Unit 774 registered a rapid escalation in the human's heart rate, shallow, rapid breathing, and heightened muscle tension in their jaw and shoulders. A low, frustrated groan rumbled in his chest as his avatar was swiftly eliminated. "No! Damn it! How did he even see me?" he yelled, slamming a fist lightly on his desk. Not pain from injury, but pain from defeat. He didn't stop. He immediately initiated another round, paying not with credits this time, but with another fragment of his emotional well-being, another surge of exasperation. His eyes, fixed on the glowing screen, narrowed with fierce concentration. Moments later, his team's virtual base was overrun. A stream of unintelligible, aggressive vocalizations erupted from his headset, communications from his digital teammates, laced with frustration and what Unit 774 identified as toxic rhetoric. The human flinched, pulling the headset from one ear, a grimace of pure annoyance twisting his features. "Seriously? What are you even doing?" he muttered, not to Unit 774, but to the unseen digital combatants. This was emotional pain, the sting of perceived inadequacy, the lash of verbal aggression, all delivered through a network of light and code. He paid for the internet connection, he paid for the game itself, and he paid, over and over, with his temper, his patience, and his emotional stability. Minutes later, a flicker of triumph crossed his face. His avatar executed a complex maneuver, eliminating a virtual enemy. "Got him!" "Yeah!" he cheered, a sharp, almost manic exhilaration replacing the previous frustration. The brief surge of positive neurochemicals was fleeting, however. Another enemy appeared. Another swift defeat. The cycle of digital frustration, anger, and brief, intoxicating victory continued. Hours blurring into an endless, self-inflicted psychological gauntlet. His eyes were red-rimmed, his posture slumped, yet he clicked, "Play again." "Just one more," he mumbled, a mantra of self-deception. The Xylos' final observation added another bewildering layer to the human enigma. They paid to enter digital landscapes of manufactured psychological distress, where frustration, anger, and the sting of failure were not just possibilities but inherent, recurring features. They paid, with their time, their money, and their emotional peace, to sit before the black mirror, willingly subjecting themselves to the digital scar. For humanity, pain wasn't just physical, spiritual, or aesthetic. It was a cognitive battle, a relentless digital struggle they embraced, believing the fleeting moments of triumph were worth the endless, self-imposed psychological torment. They chose the digital grind, not out of necessity but out of a fierce, unyielding drive to conquer, even if the enemy was often their own temper, or the meticulously designed difficulty of a program. The Xylos' primary research vessel, Perceiver 7, hung in the cold silence of space, its central analytical core humming with a desperate, almost overloaded energy. Unit 774's final aggregated report had just finished compiling, a torrent of observational data that had rendered the Xylos' understanding of sentient life utterly obsolete. The mission had been to observe human recreation, the terrifying truth. Humanity willingly, repeatedly, and enthusiastically paid for pain. From the burning agony of capsaicin-laced, spicy food, to the deliberate, muscle-tearing pressure of deep tissue massages, from the sharp, bleeding artistry of tattoos, to the precise, invasive violence of dental drills, humanity's relationship with discomfort defied every known galactic axiom. The Xylos had witnessed tens of thousands of credits exchanged for the privilege of physical torment, for the brutal reshaping of flesh, for the raw, defiant triumph over self-inflicted agony. They paid to climb electrified obstacle courses, to feel the sickening plunge of a bungee jump, to have their very nervous systems manipulated into simulated terror. They endured weeks of spiritual pilgrimages across desolate landscapes and months of post-surgical recovery for the price of a face. But the final, most unsettling data came from the digital scar, the glowing black mirror of their virtual worlds. Here, humans paid not with physical sensation, but with emotional and psychological well-being. They paid subscription fees, microtransactions, and the invaluable currency of their time to enter digital realms meticulously designed with algorithms of agony. These programs weren't meant to relax or soothe. They were engineered to frustrate, to challenge, to constantly put the human at the precipice of defeat, to deliver precisely calibrated doses of mental anguish. The Xylos had observed countless humans, hunched before their screens, faces contorted with rage, frustration, and the bitter sting of failure. They'd heard their shouts, their grunts, their whispered curses as their digital avatars were annihilated, their meticulously crafted strategies crumbling to dust. They witnessed the emotional whiplash, the momentary surge of triumph, followed by the crushing weight of another digital setback. This wasn't accidental. It was programmed. It was the core gameplay loop. And humans kept paying. They kept playing. They kept coming back for more. The Tundered Perceiver 7 Tundra central processor ran its final synthesis. Every known species in the galaxy instinctively avoided pain, dedicating vast societal resources to its eradication. Humanity, however, had built an entire native economy around it. They commodified it, monetized it, packaged it, and then willingly purchased it in every conceivable form. Physical, spiritual, aesthetic, psychological, and even digitally. Their resilience wasn't just in overcoming external threats. It was in their unparalleled, almost terrifying capacity to seek out and pay for the very experiences that would break any other sentient life form. The final report was devastatingly simple, yet profound. Conclusion: humanity is the only known species that willingly pays for pain. This behavior is not an anomaly but a fundamental, pervasive aspect of their culture, shaping their recreation, self-expression, spiritual beliefs, and even their digital interactions. Their capacity for self-inflicted suffering and their drive to conquer it in all its forms is unparalleled and presents a unique, unpredictable variable in galactic relations. For the Xylos, the understanding was complete. Humans didn't just survive overwhelming odds, they were the overwhelming odds, challenging themselves, pushing their own boundaries, and finding strange purpose in the crucible of their own agony.